ahead and introduce our guest speakers for today. And we're going to get ready to have this rich dialogue around what happened in this senseless beating. And you'll be able to ask questions at the end. And, you know, we have a pastor who is a visionary. So we want to bring her vision to life as she saw fit when this happened, that, hey, we need to do something. So we're going to have some dialogue with some elected officials, but then you'll be able to ask some questions at the end as well. So Asia, we're ready.
Thank you so much, Deacon Larry, and good morning, everyone. I echo Deacon Larry's gratitude to our pastor for creating this safe space for dialogue, and wanted to just introduce our guest speakers. Now, I will say, as you can imagine, in this season, they are talking and meeting and at church themselves. So we have 4 that will be joining us. I mean, we're going to bring them in and as they join us. So we will be joined by Mayor James, who is the mayor of Bladensburg in Maryland, the police chief in Bladensburg as well, Chief Collington. And then we also have 2 elected officials from Edmonston, Mayor Gant, who is the mayor of Edmonston, and the acting police chief, Chief Beal, who will be joining us. But we are going to get this conversation started with Mayor James, who we see on the screen with us now, and really looking to have some really rich dialogue around the incident, the murder of Tyre Nichols, the impact, and talking about it from very different angles, whether it's how we felt personally as mothers, as activists, as advocates. And then last but not least, we are joined by Mr. Chris Hawkins, who is a student at Bowie State, and I think brings a very unique perspective to this conversation, and he will be speaking and dialoguing with us as well. So Deacon Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
All right. So, Mayor James, we've been talking and briefly all last week, and you shared some of your concerns that you had as a mayor, and then one as a parent, and then one as an individual. So can you kind of like share your perspective around what happened and some of the things that we can do as a community moving forward?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to just share my heart and also to be joined by one of my wonderful teammates in Chief Tyrone Collington. As many of you have felt, what happened to Tyre Nichols was a horrible tragedy. Let's be clear, it was a murder, and let's call it what it was. I want to give my condolences to his family, and I will tell you every morning that I wake up, as I pray for my family and thank God for my daughter, I also say a prayer for his family, but specifically his mother. Because as a mom, to know that your child was brutally taken from this world and calling out for you, and that you were just beyond an earshot of being able to respond and hear his cry, I can't imagine how that compiles the grief that she's experiencing right now. And so just want to level set with what is on my heart and mind as it relates to this situation. Coming at it, I have to be cognizant that it's a multidimensional perspective. One, first as a parent, as I shared, but then also as an elected leader. It makes me disappointed and just tremendously saddened that this was an entirely preventable situation. And it leads to one of the reasons why I got involved in my community. I started out volunteering with the community outreach program. It's been renamed to Community Action Team, but the whole situation from Trayvon Martin to Sandra Bland really motivated me to say, this cannot happen in my community. And so I went to the police chief and just said, I want to help. I don't know how. I just want to make sure that this does not happen in Bladensburg. And mind you, at the time, we had a Caucasian police chief. It wasn't Chief Collington at the time. And so to be transparent as a resident, I didn't want to just sit back and wait and then do a march and protest after tragedy struck. As I said, I really was impacted by all the things that were happening in the mid 2015 and 16 with all these tragic and unnecessary murders, and just wanted to try to help. And so as a result, Chief Stone at the time connected me with the cops officer. We brainstormed on things that we could do that didn't even require a lot of money, but to start really engaging the community at a higher level and building strong relationships so that our police, one, are not policing from a point of fear because they don't have relationships with the community members, whether they're children, seniors, our working class folks, our immigrants who may have language challenges. But then from the other side, we wanted to make sure that the community members were comfortable reaching out and talking to our police officers. And while we're not perfect, we have come a long way since that time when I started volunteering back in about 2016 or 2017. And then the other thing I have to say, so I'm taking off this political hat because I am a Christian. And as a politician, you have to be careful about not crossing that line. So I'm talking to you as Takesha James, a Bladensburg resident, when I say what I have to say. This is also spiritual. Let's be honest. The municipal government, the federal government, state and county governments can only do so far, to go so far with their efforts. But the faith community, we are gasping for air from the faith community to help support the people in our community so that we don't get to this point. The Bible has told us, where we are in terms of biblical prophecy. And so we know that things from a spiritual perspective are coming at us even more fast and at a faster pace and more furious than they were 1,000 years ago. And so my plea on today's call is to really partner with the faith community, not just feeding people physically, but really starting to dig in to praying and binding up these spirits and casting them out of every single one of our neighborhoods. And so again, I don't want to cross that line. I just want to speak as a resident who's lived in this community, a Bible-believing believer in the Word of God, and just put that out there. So I'll stop there, Deacon Parrish.
No, Mayor James, that was a lot, but just your words of expressing around this, this senseless beating, this senseless murder. But I think for me, I was pulled over by, the police before, and my car had got mixed up. They thought it was stolen, but it wasn't. But I could see how that reaction could have altered in a different scenario happening, because when that happened to me, I can just physically talk about myself for now. When that happened to me, I'm 40, I think at that time, 47 years old, and I'm being pulled over. They're taking a long time to get out the car. And then the next thing I look up, it's like 7, 8 cars, and I've got 4 guns drawn on me, and I'm in my own car. And I'm saying, what in the world is going on? And they're like, get out of the car with your hands up, walk back, get on the ground, handcuffed, and I'm in my own car. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? So for me, that experience is one that I will never forget. So can you talk to us about, and I'm not sure if one of the chiefs have joined us yet, can you talk to us about, what happens when you get pulled over and you still do the right thing and you still end up dead? Oh, unmute. We need to unmute her. Okay.
Unmute, yes.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'll be honest, because I feel like I'm talking to family. So
Okay.
with Deacon Parrish, I know when we spoke the other day, that was a concern of mine as well, that I feel okay when I'm in Bladensburg if I'm pulled over, but if I'm driving on the Eastern Shore, coming back from a conference at night and I'm pulled over, that same terror pricks my heart too. And I'm in office. And so just having the fortitude, one, to pray, God, I don't know how this is going to go down, but I need you to be with me. And then secondly, I know in my experience, I called. I couldn't find the chief of police phone number at the time when I got pulled over late at night. So I called my husband and just had him on speaker on the phone, because I was like, this is a different environment. I don't want to end up in the papers or in a situation where I can't speak for myself. So having somebody on speaker, that's my best bet. I need a witness because I'm in the car by myself. And I think just using technology in a wise way, whether you hurry up and put on audio recording or you turn on video, do something to protect yourself. Don't just assume everything will go well. I mean, yes, that's our prayer, but you just don't know who you're going to encounter. And Deacon, I can't even imagine in that position. You're in your own vehicle. And what was the justification?
They ran my license plate and was confused with someone else whose car had been stolen. So they thought I was in a stolen car.
Oh,
And I
okay,
wasn't
okay.
speeding because I asked the officer, I said, well, why would you pull me over anyway? I wasn't even speeding. He said,
Right.
license plate. And I'm telling them during this whole time, Mary Jane, I'm just like, this is my car. I don't understand what's going on. Well, if it's your car, when we check out, we'll let you go. But the manner in which they talk to me, it was always perceived I'm already a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
That was my impression of how they spoke to me. I'm already guilty and I'm in my own car.
And that's the unfortunate thing, because it was like a judgment was already given before the traffic stop even occurred.
Yeah.
And that's how we all feel. And I think just being in the situation where you're transparent about it, but still professional. Good afternoon, good evening, officer. How are you? Hands on the wheel, no sudden movements. That's the talk we got when we were learning to drive and getting prepared for our license. You already have that registration and your ID on the dashboard. So when they come, I'm not reaching in the glove box. You have no reason to put your hand on any trigger, whether it's a taser or a gun. And I think just controlling what you can control with that level of preparation should help, but I can't calculate every scenario and, forecast what every officer will do. I think just that, hands on the wheel, ID and everything in the windshield. Good afternoon. How are you? I'm on my way to Bible study. Is there a problem? Or choir rehearsal? You say what you need to say to let them know, because they're making an assessment before they approach you. So by the time they get to you, if that's what the first thing out of your mouth, it's like, okay, I kind of know the type of person I'm dealing with. Like you said, okay, but you fit a description, Mr. Parrish, and let them go through that whole process. But I think to the degree possible, maintain respect, even if they may be racist or they may be just having a bad day. And maybe the last person they stopped, they were actually trying to help them for safety reasons, and the person cursed them out. And now you're the next person. There's so many things. Maybe they just came from a call where a domestic violence situation happened and the victim was murdered. They have to go through so much before they even get to you, that I think also giving them a little bit of grace and understanding can even turn that situation around that could go sideways. Maybe you can help prevent it. And even at the end of the encounter, maybe they still give you the ticket, but just saying, Mr. Officer, I don't agree with the ticket, but I just want to say I will be praying for you and your family, because I know it's tough to be in your position. I can't imagine having the police in this environment. I know things can be challenging, and I just want you to know the community is here for you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Mary Jane. And I see your chief of police has joined us as well. So thank you so much for joining us. So Leasia, I mean, we were talking about this discussion, and I'd love to get the chief's perspective on, what happened, what are some things that we can do as residents to make sure that we have a dialogue between you and the you and the officers that may pull us over. So we'd love for you to share your perspective around some of the things that we can do to make this where everybody gets out alive. And you can unmute yourself. The panel can unmute yourself. Try it again. Do it one more time. You can unmute yourself. Okay, there you go.
First of all, good morning, everyone. What I like to tell citizens when they come into an interaction with a police officer is just try to, stay compliant, do everything you can to not escalate the situation. Like Mayor James said, some officers have bad days, but to argue on the side of the road is an unwinning battle, because all you're going to do is escalate the situation even worse. And what's going to happen is, if the officer is having a bad day, or if he does have some type of bias, he's just going to charge you with unnecessary charges that you got to pay money to defend yourself in court. And that's the reason why we have these internal affairs divisions. They are the ones that come out and they investigate officers. The last thing an officer wants to do is have to explain their actions to internal affairs. Because with this new reform, everything that happens nowadays is the internal affairs has to investigate it, whether it's a minor complaint or a major complaint. So what I always tell people is, if you get pulled over and the officer's being mean or has an attitude, just stay compliant, document everything, and then at a later date in time, you can go file that complaint. You don't got to file a complaint right away. It's a year and a day. So if you want to get your evidence together and then go down 2 days from after the incident happened, you can do that. And once that takes place, now the officer has to come explain to his superiors on why he was that way, why he mistreated you. And if you get it on video, that's even better, because the video don't lie. We all create body cameras, which is easy for us to docket it. It goes uploaded where that the internal affairs can review that video at a later date in time. But having your video from your point of view, from the actual time of the stop to the end of the stop, a lot of the times the media will show you a 5-minute clip from either, the middle of the stop or towards the end. But that's not fair because we don't know what actually took place prior to that conduct. That conduct. We don't know the reason for the stop, how that driver was prior to them recording. And what happens is a lot of times, if the officer's being compliant, don't have an attitude, and then that person escalates it, they're not recording that part of the interaction. They want to record the part that's going to make them look like the victim. And not saying that's the case in every situation. So like I said, what I like to tell people is definitely go to internal affairs, because once the officer explains that, they have to explain that themselves to that person, to that investigator. That investigator then has to commit and do a full-fledged investigation and send it up to the chief of police.
Awesome. And I see we've been joined by Chief Collington as well. We'd love to share your perspective around, some of the things as residents in the community that we can do to work with law enforcement and not work against it, and everybody still arrive home safe.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Some of the things that we could do, and I'm not sure if they've already been mentioned, but one, we can have that open dialogue with our community. We can do our neighborhood walks. We can do our coffee with the cops. We can, you can just reach out to the chiefs. You can reach out to our patrol guys out there, because we instruct our guys to always be approachable. And so with that being said, because it's a whole community in action that needs to take place in order for us to all stay safe in the community. So I just want to make sure that, we put that out there, that, that we have these robust outreach programs that we have. We have our Citizen Police Academy. We have our Police Explorer youth programs. We have mentorship programs. So as a community, we can all step up to the plate and work together to make sure that we are, one, working together, two, that we hold each other accountable. So the most important thing I could say is just have that open lines of communication. And I would just also encourage our residents to do ride-alongs with us. You can contact me, you can contact our community outreach team, and just do ride-alongs. And that way you get a better perspective of what it's like to be a police officer riding through the community. Just see some of the things that we see in the community as we engage.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to get the questions at the end. So what we want to do now is we wanted to have somebody on our panel so we can get like real life scenarios from someone who's out there, a Bowie State student, drives, walks through the mall, things of that nature. So we wanted Chris to come on and kind of share his perspective of how he felt as what happened. So Chris, you can unmute yourself.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Christian Hawkins. I'm a sophomore at Bowie State. Larry, you asked, how did I feel about the incident?
Yes.
It kind of left me discouraged with the police and just like the policing system. My mom's in the military, so I never really grew up with a really big fear of police officers or people in positions of authority. I always kind of admired them. But of course, as the years have progressed, I've just been left kind of like jaded with the police and constantly hearing about senseless police brutality and just injustice. This particular incident really left me discouraged because it was mostly Black men who did this senseless beating, but it kind of just left me discouraged, disappointed.
And I know, Chris, we had dialogue last week. You were saying even when you're walking through the mall, not even driving, I'd love for you to share that story that you shared with me last week.
Oh yeah, I'm just like extra alert when there's officers around. I was taking the train to Union Station when you called me, actually, and I saw an officer looking at me, which just immediately made me feel like, okay, he's probably profiling me or whatever. And he didn't even say anything, but it made me realize that there's just this fear that we've been conditioned to have for police officers. And I think police officers are conditioned to have that same fear for us. But I had my hoodie on. I didn't know how he was perceiving me, but he just kept looking at me. And I'm like, okay, maybe he's perceiving me as a threat. And I was just wondering, how can we dismantle this conditioning that we've all had to look at each other as threats? And these are like Black officers oftentimes that I'm seeing doing this. Any bad encounter I've had with an officer, it was surprisingly never with a white officer. It was actually Black officers. And they never really progressed to something that I would say was really bad, but it was always just overly aggressive policing from the beginning. Like you said, had guns drawn when you were pulled over, guns drawn, screaming at you, just how they were handling you. It was like as if you were already guilty of something. That was always my situation. Anytime I had an encounter with the police, it was just automatically over-aggressively policing instead of like peacekeeping and trying to figure out where they can help. Yeah, those are kind of some of my concerns and divisions I would like to see law enforcement going less over aggressive policing and more peacekeeping and keeping the community together, because I don't think officers are like bad people. I think most people don't want to see people in positions of authority that way. So.
Okay, thanks, Tristan. I'm going to turn it over to the agent because we got a lot of questions in the chat that I can see. So I'm going to turn it over to the agent. She's going to do our Q&A portion.
Absolutely. And thank you to all of our panelists. And I'll go through the questions and also maybe just try to group some of them so that we can get to as many as possible.
Also, I just want, wait a minute, I'm also going to say, and we've also been joined by Mayor Grant too. I see her now.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Mayor Grant. And please feel free to chime in on the questions as they come across. And Mayor James, I think this question came in as you were talking about maybe if you're by yourself, having a phone, on speaker that someone can hear you so that there's a witness to maybe a stop that you had. Does anyone on the panel, and maybe the chiefs as well, a recommendation around citizens having dashboard cameras?
Chief Collington, I'll jump in on that. And if I can just say real quick, because I didn't have the opportunity to give my perspective on the Tyre Nichols case. And if I can just take like quick 30 seconds to say that I definitely am against what happened to Mr. Tyre because it should have never happened. There should be accountability, which it's happening now. So I just want to say that when we talk about these type of situations, we talk about the culture of policing. And I would say it starts at the top because what we have to do is our men and women that serve on the police department, and 99% of them are good police officers. 99% of them do come to work and want to do a good job. It's just the small couple that a few incidents that makes us all look bad. And I just want to say that we do stand, and me as a chief as well, stand in solidarity with the Nichols family, because that should have never happened to him. Those individuals were thugs. They were murderers that wore a badge and called themselves a police officer. So that should have never happened to him. So I just wanted to make sure that I put my perspective on what happened to Mr. Tyre Nichols, and my heart goes out to him and his family, as well as to his community, because that should have never happened to him. And it wasn't a training issue. It wasn't a policy failure. It was a police culture that was breeding in that police department. And there was no accountability in that specialized unit that had complaints made against them. So I just want to put that on the record that I do not condone anything, any of the actions. I do not support any of the actions of those officers that committed that heinous murder of Mr. Tyre Nichols. That should have never happened. So I just want to make sure our audience know my perspective as chief of police for the Bladensburg Police Department, where we stand on that.
Thank you so much for adding that, Chief Collington. And I guess if you can, yourself and Chief Bill, maybe add to the question of dashboard cameras for citizens. Is that something that is legal and something that you would suggest?
Yes, I think device or any leverage that a citizen can have to make themselves feel comfortable. Because we shouldn't have any fear of doing our job as police officers. We should operate within the scope of the law, within the scope of our policies and procedures. So someone having a dash cam, yes, because the video is going to tell a story. We make our officers wear body cameras, so we should encourage our residents to have cameras there so they can have their own evidence, because that's what we want to go to at the end of the day. We want to have a full, transparent investigation into anyone that may have a complaint against a police officer.
Thank you so much. And this next set of questions, and maybe I'll pause for a second, Mayor Gant, if you wanted an opportunity, a few seconds to share your perspective with regards to the murder of Tyree Nichols. We'll keep you in the loop with the Q&A as well, but wanted to pause and give you that opportunity. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And just like everyone else, I think that it was not a reflection of all of our police officers. And it is tough to push that message because we've seen so much. It was, I will say, a bit embarrassing to find out that these were Black officers they should have been in a mentoring position. Always as leaders, and I believe our police officers are leaders, they should always be in a mentoring position, especially if they understand the struggles that police officers have gone through, the bad look or the negative feeling that our officers have gone through. This is the opportunity now for officers to be good examples of law enforcement. And I believe it is very unfortunate. And just like the mother said, those actions placed their families into harm's way. And I think that we have to do something. And this conversation is great. We have to have conversations and get ideas and move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And Mayor James, I know you wanted to add in on the conversation around a dash cam. So I just wanted to give that to you. And then I will tee up the next question that's really going to have to do with how to respond if you are stopped. So just so our chiefs can kind of hear the question that's coming, but Mayor James, if you can talk about the dashboard. You can hear it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And again, to the points that were raised, I think just as the police have their body cams, and especially in the state of Maryland, the legislation that came down last year and the state legislature now mandates all police departments to have them. But I think what Chief Collington said is so important. As residents, we need to protect ourselves because you want to make sure the whole encounter is observed and able to be shared. Some, like he mentioned, some people focus on a specific thing, but we need to make sure that if there is a problem, the entire story can be, recalled and played back. And also just wanted to throw into, as residents, we pay taxes. And so my expectation from everyone on this call, especially our leaders, is that you're proactive in reaching out to your local police departments and introducing yourselves to them, just saying, can I have 5 minutes with the chief or speak to someone? I'm so-and-so, I live at this street. I just want you to know we're here to be a partner with you. I want to know what programs that you guys have that I can be involved with or things that my church can partner with. We have to create the environments that we want to have. It's not okay to say, I'm afraid of the police and just leave it there. And we owe it to ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, those who cannot speak for themselves. And so that's my call to action today when we walk away from this is I'm begging you, please reach out. I'm not saying you have to volunteer every day, every month, but you can do something once a year to help create the kind of relationship with those local officers and the leadership that you want to have. And as I said, that's what motivated me to even run for office. I started out working with the COPS office, but when I was in a position of leadership and it was time to select a new chief, I knew that I needed someone who reflected Bladensburg, who had the same value system that I had, who would never have a scorpion unit in our community. That would not even be considered. To have a police chief that if a resident comes by and they want to meet with him, his door is always open. You know, of course, if they're in the middle of some major thing, he may have to get back to them. Someone who's responsive, someone who genuinely believes in good customer service and loves people. But the only way that can happen is if everyone on this call gets involved and makes it known to your local police department, what are your expectations? How do you want to be treated? Whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, if you encounter an officer, what do you deserve? What do you expect? And so I just wanted to share that because Chief Collington's remarks has sparked that thought. So thank you, Leasia.
Thank you so much, Mayor James. And I'm going to bucket one more question, and then I'm going to go to Deacon Rick Loper right after this question. Just it had come early on, and then Deacon Rick, I'm going to come to you. It was really a question around what we can do if being pulled over, or is there something someone mentioned, I know I'm going to be pulled over, but it's a dark, unlit area. Is there any penalty in terms of continuing to go until you get to a lighter area? And then for the police chiefs, there was mention around so many patrol cars coming if there's a stop. Is there any kind of standard or expectation around, if it's one vehicle, how many police vehicles there are?
So this Chief Bill, I can kind of chime in on that. So you do have the right to go to a well-lit area. What I tell people is if they don't feel comfortable, turn your hazards lights on and drive at a slow, reasonable speed to the next well-lit area. You have that option. We don't consider it fleeing until you take off at a high rate of speed and you just don't stop for like 5 or 6 blocks. But normally you put your hazard lights on, that way to also you're acknowledging that you're being pulled over, go to a well-lit area where you feel comfortable at, and then you can go ahead with the stop. The reason it's so many vehicles on one vehicle when we pull somebody over, it's just for officer safety. It's not a tactical advantage. It's just that, you know, in today's time with everything going on with active shooters and stuff like that, we want to be prepared. So until we can figure out if there's one person in the car and there's one officer, you may not see another backup officer. It's when we get 3 or 4 individuals in the car and that one police officer is by itself. It's kind of like a de-escalation technique versus the officer having to deal with 4 people at the same time. Just the mere police officer's presence of seeing 2 or 3 backup officers won't allow the scene to escalate any further. And that way, you know, the one officer that put the traffic stop can initiate and do what he has to do, and the backup officer is just there to make sure that everything goes smoothly and to prevent anything from escalating.
Thank you so much.
And if I could just add to those are good points from Chief Bill. And I would also just say if they have time, if they could call, they can also call 911 and they can tell the operator that I am not fleeing. I don't feel safe. I'm driving to a well-lit area. And the dispatch will relay that over to the police officer that this person isn't trying to get away or do anything evasive. They are just going for their safety to a well-lit area. And that's sort of that de-escalation point as well.
Thank you so much. I think those are both 2 really good tips that I know I didn't know. I'm not sure that any of us knew, but back to how do we help de-escalate? I'm going to go to Deacon Rick Loper for his comment, and then we have quite a few questions coming in just around training for the officers and what officers go through in terms of their de-escalation and even some of the screening when working in our communities, just to give you a heads up on some of the questions that are coming. Hi, Deacon Rick. Can you unmute yourself? It should be coming your way. 1 second.
Okay.
Do it one more time. You were there.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Listen, I want to start off by letting you know I'm 70 years old. So I've seen some things that I don't see anyone here old enough to have seen. Separate water fountains, separate bathrooms, and truly second-class citizenship. Okay. Now, at 15, I was in the street rioting, fighting against white police officers for the oppression. They told me the only way to change the system is to join the system. Okay, so now I am certified in the state of Maryland and the state of Pennsylvania armed guard status in Maryland. It's called Act 235 in Pennsylvania. So I'm allowed to carry a weapon, okay? So now I am walking the most precarious line that I can be walking, okay? Because I'm a Black man with a gun, okay, at times. And if I'm being pulled over, because usually when I'm carrying a weapon, it's because I'm going to do some type of a security detail, or I am doing the security detail at my church. So as a person who walks the line, who works with police officers in many different situations, I struggle with this whole situation, and everybody on here is Black. Now, police are police to me. However, culturally, we were told that if we become part of the systems, that our cultural attitudes would be kind of factored in. Now, Memphis has kind of changed that, but not really, because sometimes, and let me be very honest with you, sometimes the Black police officer is worse than the white police officer. So let's be real, let's have a real dialogue. Now, what I hear as a proud Black man is you tell me to bow down to a system where I've done nothing wrong. I've done absolutely nothing wrong. Now, it's been proven time and time again through these videos that some of the police reports are false. So now you're telling me I'm at the mercy of this man and maybe I can do something later. That doesn't go down well, okay? So what you're telling me is, nigga, shut up, okay? Let's be real here. You understand? I love God. I'm saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Spirit. But we need to have a real dialogue, okay? And we need some real change. And just like he's having a bad day, what if I had a bad day, okay? Or there's a case of mistaken identity. There are a lot of variables. We want to give, okay, so let's say we're going to give grace on both sides. I'll be diplomatic. However, at the same time, the mayor talked about paying taxes. It says on the side of the police card to protect and to serve, okay? So first off, you know, how are you protecting me, dragging me out the car, spraying? Our soldiers have been sprayed with mace because they pulled to a lighted area, you know, with weapons drawn on them. So I'm saying something needs to change on both sides. I understand that we do have drugs and issues and things, but that's not everybody, okay? But as a Black man, I'm 6'4". I'm 6'4". I'm 240 pounds. I'm very muscular, and I'm 70 years old. Okay, they approach me like, you know, I just knocked over Fort Knox. Okay, there are guys like me, the chiefs. You're younger. We marched, we protested, we did everything so guys like you can wear uniforms and change the system. However, over the last 7 decades, you understand, from civil rights, from separate water fountains, from genuine segregation, from going to separate schools. You see, my perspective is just a little different. That's why I said to Liasia, this is a one-way conversation, because right now, all I hear is surrender and comply, okay? And then maybe later, if you can cut through the lies and the blue wall and all that kind of stuff, maybe something will occur. Well, most people aren't willing to do that, okay? And go through those changes. So, and I understand in Bladensburg, you know, everybody I see here is Black, okay? So I don't see other people who have put these systems in place. And at some point, you know, at some point, and you're seeing it with our young people, and I don't mean to incite anything, but I'm telling you, these young people are not going to continue to live on their knees. They're going to die on their feet, and it's going to be a problem. So hear me now, because it's coming. It's slowly but surely coming. And then you got all these militias and other individuals out here running around with weapons, AK-47s. If something is not, if we don't get a handle on it, we got a problem, and it's just as clear as the nose on your face. So
Deacon Rick, I think some of what you're sharing, just so you know, because I know as you're talking, you may not see the chat. The passion that you're sharing within the experience and even the real dialogue is something that's being echoed in the chat. So if you, and you're getting some applause and claps as well, I think you are certainly opening up the next phase of this conversation around what can we do? And is it a system that will only work if we are the ones that are just de-escalating, or to your point.
And that's exactly my point. We've always had to be the one to make the crossover. We've always had to be the one to surrender. We've always had to be the one to make somebody else feel comfortable. Okay, you know, we're going way past that now. So like I said, I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to help law enforcement because you're spread so thin, so you can't cover the churches. You can't cover. There's a lot of the fastest growing business in this country right now is security. It's blowing up like nobody's business all over the place. Okay, so I'm not anti-police, I'm not anti-law anything, but I'm pro positive interaction and treating people with dignity. As long as you continue to treat us with no dignity, there's going to be a problem. And I'm telling you, I've been there when the riots blew up. I've been through the powder keg being stuffed until it finally exploded. This powder keg is being stuffed, you guys. Y'all need to know it. And when it explodes, it'll be Deacon Rick that tried to warn you that this is going the wrong direction and it's moving far, far too slowly. So I think Mayor James,
a number of hands came up after that. So if we can go to Mayor James.
Actually, Chief Collington, you want to go ahead, but I did want to respond.
You came off. My apologies. You came off the screen. Go ahead, Chief Collington.
I just want to address a few things that Deacon Rick said, and I definitely respect his perspective and his input. But I just want to also say that culturally, there has been a problem with policing, and we will own and we will take responsibility for that. But when you talk about when you bring the right people to the table, I can't speak for what's going on in California and no other place. I can only speak for where I have control over, and that is in the town of Bladensburg, where I proudly serve as the chief of police. And one thing I would say that Deacon Rick hit on is I've often said, a man with three things I say: a man will let you take his property, a man will allow you to arrest him. One thing a man will die and fight you tooth and nail on is his dignity. So as a culture, as a leader of an organization, it's incumbent upon me to set that atmosphere within my organization. Now, we don't take any side steps, so we don't take any, we don't take this stuff personal when we hear things like people, have AKs and things like that. We will say violence is never the answer. Violence is never the answer. One wrong don't make another wrong right. So violence is never the answer. So what we need to have more, where we can get more input, more action, is to have dialogue, to have that positive interaction in the community. And it's not that everyone has to live on their knees. What we want is respect. I demand respect from my officers or anyone else that I lead when they have interactions with it. And that's the culture of Bladensburg. I can't speak for nowhere else. I was on a podcast earlier this week, and I mentioned that the culture in Bladensburg, it doesn't matter if you go into 7-Eleven, if you go in McDonald's, wherever you go, the culture of the atmosphere within Bladensburg is we respect each other. This is why we want to keep Bladensburg thriving and vibrant as a place that people want to come to visit. And if you don't feel safe with your own police department, then you need to look at the chief of police. That's who you need to look at. If you having problems with your officers on the street, you need to address that with your chief of police. Because I tell you that the side that I stand on is not the metaphor of the thin blue line. Any one of my officers know I don't subscribe to the metaphor of that thin blue line. I stand on the side of truth, and I stand on the side of respect, and I stand on the side of the law. That's it. Not black or white. I stand for the truth, and I stand with our community. That's why we have these engagements. That's why we have these police walks. We want to hear from our citizens. We want to know what your priorities are for us. And as the chief, I want to know what expectations you have for the police. I want to know about your inaction. So if it's a training issue, we will address it. If it's a policy issue, we will address it. If it's something that person is not a fit for our department, we have a personnel early warning system. So that what that means is if the same officer get 4 complaints and they all stem around respect, then that's a problem. 4 different people that don't know him had a negative encounter and they complain about his behavior. That's where the personnel early warning system comes in effect. Once you trigger 3 or 4 incidents, then at that point now it goes to a supervisor and then it works its way up the chain. So we try as hard as we can in these challenging and uncertain times. We try to police the best way that we can in our communities to make our residents feel safe. And we need strong residents to step up to the plate. When you see something, say something, whether it's police action, whether it's criminal activity in the neighborhood. We all working together for the same goal, and that's to keep our communities safe.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Leasia, we got about 10 minutes, so let's try to make the next couple of questions real concise and the responses to them real concise, because I really want to make sure we get to everyone's question. And oh my God, this has been such great dialogue, just what we thought it would be. And it doesn't end here because we're already talking about we have to do a part 2. So Leasia, let's try to put together questions in there.
Absolutely. I saw Mayor James had her hand up. If she wanted, did you want to quickly add? And then
it's okay. I know we're short on time. Go ahead, Leasia. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think this question kind of speaks to I'm going to group a few questions together, and I believe Chief Collington started to talk about it. In regard to, I think there's one thing, and we've had incident after incident in terms of representation in the police force, right? So after multiple incidents, there's been a push. I live in New York City, where you're looking to increase the diversity of our police force so that they look like our communities. But that doesn't automatically mean that happens. There's work that has to take place. So there are some questions around the type of training either officers go through that if they see a situation escalating, they can de-escalate, or if you're an officer that witnesses something that's escalating, because they think in this instance, where maybe there were some that were maybe more aggressive than others. So is there training someone may mention, we go through so many background screenings for jobs that are not to protect and serve communities. Can anyone shed some light on the kind of hiring process and then some of the training that takes place for officers?
So Chief Bill again, we go through a stringent background process that could take anywhere up to a month to 3 or 4 months. And the reason we do that is we try to weave out the negativity as best we can. But what I like to tell people is you can take somebody who's never been arrested, never got a speeding ticket, and you make them the police. Now, what happens is once that person sees the perks of the job and see what they can do, sometimes, I hate to say it, we create that monster. We create that person who goes out here and take advantage of what we give them. You know, you got the right to pull people over. You could go into a certain establishment and get free items. And so that 6 months ago, that person was a regular citizen and now they're a police officer. So that's why it's important that we continue to be real strict about our hiring process.
I think we may have lost Chief Bill. I know he was having some sound issues.
Leasia, I'll just add in and then I'll toss it to Chief Collington. But one of the things, though, is every single police department needs to have a general order about the duty to intervene. I don't care if it's my partner and I'm a police officer. If I see them cross a line, and not even to have the victim end up dead, but if I see them cross the line, just as that officer should be held accountable, so should I. Because I was in a position to stop it from happening and I did not do so. And following the George Floyd death, that was something that Chief Collington actually put into place with our officers. And he didn't just push it on a piece of paper, but he met with them. There was training around that to ensure that that was not the case in our community. And I think going back to something that Deacon Loper said, you know, he's more seasoned than any of us. So he's seen the change from no Black officers in law enforcement to where we are now with more diverse police departments, maybe not to the extent they need to be, but there's certainly an improvement. And I just want to say that's the piece that is so heart-wrenching and disgusting about what happened with Mr. Nichols, because Dr. King died in Memphis. And before he died, he was there helping trash workers to get the fair payment and wages that they had. You know, to have such a historical story that meant so much to the Civil Rights Union, and then to have this incident with predominantly Black officers involved, it is utterly disgusting. Because they were given a privilege to serve and protect. That is a privilege. And because of the lack of leadership in that department and the lack of accountability, that I was reading, there were other incidents prior to this. They didn't result in someone's death, but there were plenty of signals that should have been read and prevented this situation from happening. And as an elected official, that was one of the reckonings I had to have when I came in to office. It wasn't all peachy keen, because being a volunteer, I got to see what wasn't right. And when I got into office, that was one of the things I sought to address. There was some racist cops with some specific histories and incidents. And there we had to follow the process, work it through with Chief Collington and the leadership. But those people are not here. We cannot let it be okay that we know, oh, that's just that one hard, stiff-necked officer. No, we got to get them out. So I just wanted to share that we can't just sit back and let these people happen, like the brother who drinks, or, that cousin that's a little bad, that's just little Ray, that's how he is. No, get them out, uproot them, because a little leaven will leaven the whole loaf.
And I think thank you so much, Mayor James, and Chief Collin, I'll come to you. I think what you also have heard, and it brings to, I think, many of our minds, is that the George Floyd Policing Act has some of these policy changes, because every state is governed differently. And so taking advantage of some federal legislation, but I think that's where we as a community, we have the ability to be the voice of change that we want to see and drive policy changes, as you mentioned, so that there's no space for behaviors to be tolerated that are harmful and deadly to us as a community. So thank you for that. Chief Collington, did you want to add on the topic around training?
Yes, and the mayor hit the nail on the head. Right after George Floyd murder, I immediately implemented a duty to intervene, and it is very robust. I mean, it details first aid, it details officers taking action, it details officers reporting. You are now required to report misconduct of your fellow officer. Because what we want to do, we all took a pledge to preserve the sanctity of life. And when it comes to training, we do more training. We do more scenario-based training where we put our officers under stress to see how they act. Because this is what was going on out here. We want to make sure that we have our officers are balanced. Now, I'm not going to go too much historically into the culture, what Bladensburg used to look like, to what it looked like since Mayor came on board and I came on board, our hiring process. So our hiring process isn't failing us. What has to happen is, we just have to get people from the community that know the community, they grew up in the community. Those are going to be your best people. Why? Because they know each other in the community. We can't arrest our way out of every situation. So we have to have alternatives to incarceration. We have to have alternatives to police, aggressive and excessive force. So when these things happen, I brought someone up in our police department to do integrity checks on our body cam. I've opened investigations based off of some footage that I saw on a body cam where the person that was involved in that did not come into the police department to make a complaint. I initiated the investigation because under no circumstances will I ever allow any of our officers to mistreat anybody. Because on traffic stops, I tell the officers all the time, you talk to that person like you would talk to your mother, right? So, and one thing again, I said again, is about the dignity. You treat people the way you want to be treated. And that's the culture that we are building in Bladensburg. Now, sometimes officers do make mistakes or they do make bad judgment calls. And what happens, there's accountability. So anyone that knows me, the mayor wouldn't have me here if I wasn't able to do the job, remain impartial, and make sure that we're operating under the code of law.
Thank you so much, Chief, and thank you for your transparency and being proactive. You see a lot of people's heads are nodding because It's empowering to know that we have someone who's overseeing a police force that understands humanity and is willing to be proactive instead of reactive. So thank you so much. There is a question in the chat for Chris. As a college student, really looking to ask if some of the conversation that's happening on today's discussion, whether it's how to de-escalate, the interaction of police, the power in your voice as a tax-paying citizen, but are those types of lessons and messages taking place on your campus?
No, and that's why I think these kind of discussions are useful and we need more of them. But the kind of discussions that are taking place on my campus, I believe his name was Deacon Rick, and he talked about the younger generation coming together and I guess knowing our rights, because that's how we look at it. Those are the kind of discussions that are happening, and that's what we wish to see when we're being policed. A lot of the times our rights are being violated from the very beginning. We're not being spoken to like people. The interactions are very undignified, especially if you're younger. The officer will just ask you what your name is. He'll never introduce himself, never create any kind of dialogue rather than just immediate aggressive policing. So those are the kind of discussions that are happening on campus, but no one's being taught.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I think there is a overarching theme around things haven't not changed in 20, 25 years. Someone put in the chat, this scenario sounds like one that took place with her son more than 25 years ago. So when we're not seeing change, what can we do as a community to drive that change? Because I think, Mayor James, you talked a bit about it. We are often called together after an incident, but what can we do as a community, both a faith community and tax-paying members of communities, to get our voice in the room and at a table and drive the changes that we need to see in our communities?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think we don't stop until we get the results that we need. But again, it has to start. And if your local police department is not proactive with community engagement, then I apologize for that, because that's something that they should be doing. And as I said before, you take the lead, go down to the police station, introduce yourself, ask for a meeting. If you can't get the chief, ask for one of the leadership officers there, whether it's the deputy chief or someone else, to let them know this is who I am, this is where I live. I've been here for X number of years. I care about this community, and I want to be proactive in making sure we don't have the tragedies occur here that we've seen in other parts of the country. How can we work together? And if it's you volunteering individually, that's great. But if there's room for partnerships, I'm telling you, some of this stuff, yes, we can work on it. We can put money into programs. We can have more officers, but there's a spiritual side of this, and we cannot ignore that. And you guys have power. You have power. We talk about it on Sundays. We shout about it on Sunday mornings, and then we go back to our regular lives after we get out of church. And that has to stop. Things as simple as a community prayer. Just say, look, we want to come out and pray for the officers. You're transforming some things that as elected officials, I can't do, but you can, because this thing has to change from the root. It is a systemic problem, it is a spiritual problem, and we have to come together. If there's things that you can do for the police department to say, hey, we want to do a prayer breakfast, we want to have your leadership speak, we want to invite the community and the local minister. There's some low-hanging fruit things that we can do to at least open up the dialogue. Maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just a community meeting where we want to just have residents come in and share that some have had good experiences, but some have had negative ones, and we can't run from them. We got to talk about it. And we're not trying to put a specific person on blast. What we're trying to show you is we want this department to be better. It can be better. And we're not going to stop reaching out until it is better. But if we get upset when an incident happens and then 6 months later, we don't come together, we have not made any progress, the George Floyd Act still hasn't been passed, then shame on us, because all we did was give lip service. And as Deacon Rick said earlier, we've seen what diligence has changed from those days of cops being mostly white, using dogs against us, turning fire hoses on us to where we are now. We have come too far. We still have a long way to go, and it's on us. We've got to do it. Mayor Gant, I know you're big on community engagement, but
if you can also add in as well. Thank you, Mayor James.
Sure thing. I wanted to say Chief Collington hit on something that was really, really strong, and he is making his department accountable. He's accountable to the community, and his officers have to be accountable for their actions. And one thing I know, we have MOUs in our communities, and Chief Collington has made it a point. I know when we first appointed our chief, Chief Beal, Chief Collington made it a point. I got him. I'm going to lock arms with him. And that's what's important. That's what I was talking about, mentoring. In order to have a strong community, a safe community, or a safer community, we have to lock arms with those in leadership. Mayor James and I, we lock arms. We do things together. When you find, we have to be one mind. We have to stay focused, one mind. I also know that there are some other partners, not Mount Rainier, Brentwood. I'm not saying not Mount Rainier, but Brentwood. They're connected. We assisted Riverdale in some of their ventures. So those type of things, when you have good intended or intentional officers, that kind of spills over. See, negative can spill over, but also professionalism and community can spill over. And that's what I believe that we're doing. It's been established, and I think we're doing more and more and better. And I know my chief feels connected. I'm speaking for him, right? But I know he feels connected. He feels like he has support. If there's something that he doesn't know how to do because of an incident, he has established relationships where he can learn, and he has other people to come alongside of him. And that's how we really build a stronger community, and we're accountable. If he does something out of line, I'm sure one of the chiefs will say, look here, that was a bad call, but I'm here for you. This is what you do next time. Let's fix this. Thank you.
And again, that's so powerful, the reinforcement of the need of community, and community even within policing. And I don't think it's by chance or coincidence that we are here with 2 mayors and 2 police chiefs and a college student that are all Black, and sitting at tables and having a voice and helping to change policy and shift culture. But as each and every person was talking, I think there were some conversations around what we can do. So there's prayer that we can do as a faith community, but there's also practical involvement and engagement. So I was on a session, and someone raised the question of, between the George Floyd murder and the murder of Tyree Nichols, what have you done? Have you attended a community board meeting? Have you visited your local precinct? Have you written your senator to encourage for the George Floyd Act to be passed? And if you can't answer yes to those questions, there's an opportunity for us individually as well, because this change is going to take all of us. And I think that each of you have reinforced that. There have been so many questions and conversations and feedback in the chat that really, Deacon Larry and I, we thought we would have to start probing some questions, but we certainly knew it wasn't going to be necessary the minute this dialogue started. So I'm just going to say thank you to our panelists, and I'm over to Deacon Larry.
Thank you so much for being my co-host. Thank you, mayors. Thank you, Chief of Police. Thank you, Chris. And I also want to thank our pastor. I'm not sure if she's still on, if she wanted to come on and say something, because this is her vision. She cast the vision, and I just try to catch it and put it forward. So I'm not sure if she's on, but I wanted to, before we close out, if our pastor had anything that she wanted to say. But again, I'll say on her behalf, thank you all so much. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for giving up your time to want to have this dialogue. And we're going to continue this dialogue, because we won't get everything answered here. But I love what SHINE stands for. SHINE stands for sharing hope in a negative experience. This was a negative experience, and just us having this dialogue, we can help maybe prevent something like this happening again, or happening in our community. I will say it's not a matter of if, it's when. And how do we, as elected officials, as police officers, as the community, working together as a hand and not just as fingers? I think that's how we close the gap. It won't happen overnight, but it's not one of us, but it's all of us doing our part to close that gap on racial or whatever it is. I don't care whatever it is, because to your point, I think it was Mayor James said, it all starts with God. And if you got God on your side, you got the majority. Okay, got the majority. So I want to thank you all again on behalf of our pastor and all the people who stayed on. We started at 70. I think we're down to like 50 now. Some people had to go, they had other appointments, but I've gotten so many texts and so many things in the chat that people saying, let's continue this dialogue. This was one of the best V-Talks that we've ever had. So we will continue this dialogue. And again, thank you to the chiefs, thank you to the mayors, and thank you to Chris, and thank you to my lovely co-host for facilitating this with me. Couldn't have done it without you. So thank you all. We're going to sign off now. So thank you all so much.